Okay, welcome back to the Gut Shot podcast. The podcast is evolving very, very fast and furious. Wednesdays, Sam and I will talk about mostly anything under the sun. Fridays is when we talk to guests and guests with a very specific and deep expertise in the subject or region we're discussing. Today, of course, we welcome Fui Soong. Fui is an academic, a scholar who looks very deeply at China and Russia. Today, obviously, the focus is on China, and we're going to do a deep dive. But before we begin with Fui, Sam, today is August the 1st, and we've seen the tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs being announced with finality by the US government. Malaysia's on 19, same as Indonesia. But overall, I think we were more right than wrong in terms of where we're prognosticating on the tariffs.
I would say this though. It's not that we are more right than wrong. Actually, I would say we've been spot on. And I'm going to do a victory lap on all our prognostication. So here it goes, ladies and gentlemen. The July numbers are in. So let's take that victory lap, shall we? On our episode 6, where we talk about Trump's tariffs and we say he will win, mostly, right? Number 1, the GDP has exceeded expectation at 3% growth, which in quarter 1 was a shrunk GDP. So we've got 3% in quarter 2, with expectation from so-called expert that it would have been 2%. Then we've got inflation down at a clip of 1.5%, and that amounts to 2.1%. So that is another win for Trump. Thirdly, we also saw personal income growth at 3%. This is in spite of the massive government downsizing by Doge of almost 70,000 personnel out of a federal job. Okay? So we are looking at as well a federal revenue of about 127 billion in tariffs with no inflation. And it's expected to actually grow to 300 million at the end of the year. That is a conservative estimate. So as you can see, deregulation of energy investment, production, eliminating green subsidies and environmental regulation on greenhouse gases probably cost hundreds of billions to the US economy that are wasted. And what we've seen now is the result of just 6 months of Trump policies. Therefore, I want to close out just this update in saying that, ladies and gentlemen, the Gut Shot podcast was absolutely right. Stay on with us. Let's go to the...
Well, the one glaring omission from these trade results is the fact that China and the US have yet to reach some kind of finality. And I think that's where you come in, Fui. Where are we right now in terms of this impasse, at this point in time, this temporary impasse? Where are we going to go from here?
Okay, I think the US-China trade negotiations, I think they've had already at least 3-4 rounds kind of thing with Scott Bessent involved, and there were always it's usually very done in closed door sessions and things like this, because I think in some sense the US understands how China works. They don't like to go out and speak in the public and make everything known. However, I see this impasse to continue to be extended, unfortunately, which actually going to cause a lot more uncertainty within the region for us. I understand that. I think China understands that Trump's way of approaching trade negotiations, or any kind of negotiations for that matter, is more a so-called and very much a deal-making kind of approach. So you aim high, shoot low, or that kind of things. But I think it has come to a point where I can feel that the negotiators from people like Wang Yi, their foreign minister, and the tone of the Chinese officials does give me a sense that there is a level of fatigue that's setting in, and that they rather pivot outside of US's play. So they're looking for other actors or spheres of influence. Is what I think that's how I would actually, they're trying to calibrate a different trading order, not trading system, but a different order, so that the rules are not so one-sided and determined by a single party, and where they have to be the receiving end. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's, I think, fascinating because first of all, I think the numbers that emanate from China are not always as accurate as we hope they would be, right? But I think generally speaking, China has a diversified output distribution to the rest of the world. I think obviously South Africa is a big component, Southeast Asia is a big component, Australia is a big component. I think America could be somewhere in the region of 15% of output, give or take, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think
something like that.
I think in terms of trade, I think since Trump 1.0, they were already, I think China was already preparing for Trump 2.0.
Yeah.
Right? And I think since then, they have been trying to diversify their markets away from, or at least diversify away from the US, pivoting to maybe South America, Australia, ASEAN. So much so that trade balance, I think the US actually makes up about 12 to 13%.
Yeah.
Which is about the equivalent of ASEAN. So logically speaking, again, this is all playing with statistics. If you double the consumption in ASEAN to buy from China, you virtually can replace everything. Of course, not one-to-one, because what the US consumer consumes and the ASEAN, an ASEAN consumer are two totally different things. I mean, at the top level, it's very simple, but it's not. It is not quite one-to-one. But I think in terms of de-risking, they have done a lot. Africa, I think it's not so much a consumption play at the moment, but more a resource play, which they have invested for the last 20 odd years. What they are trying to do then is to raise the living standards of African nations to become the new generation of consumers. But how does it help you? I mean, that is a long-term play, but then how does it help you in the short term? Certainly China's overcapacity is real. When you go to China, I think a lot of the factories are maybe operating at 60%, some of them maybe as low as 30%. I know a lot of people say, factories are shutting down and there are protests and things like this. You see scenes like this on the social media, hundreds, and people say hundreds of factories are closing down. But you got to understand China's scale, right? Hundreds of factories. You have, I think the number of registered companies in China is something like 1.2 million registered companies. So a few hundred is not a big sum. But on the other hand, it is true that a lot of them are actually suffering from overcapacity, especially on the low end side. So now China is, I think the government is, their approach has always been about competition. So at the local level, if you are suffering from overcapacity, the government is not going to come in and bail you out. That's not what they do. They don't believe in bailouts. So you got to figure out at the grassroots level, at the county level, at your village level, at your province level, the governor is almost like a CEO, They have KPIs. They have KPIs that they have targets that they have to meet. So you got to figure out what works for you as a county, as a village, as a province, to be able to ensure that the GDP of your province stays at a certain level.
Do you so from your understanding, the metric with respect to the KPI, so to speak, right? The topmost one, from what I understand, is the GDP, mainly, basically, whether you look at regional GDP or territorial GDP, and then it becomes the overall Chinese GDP, right? Is there another metric that you understand as being secondary or a close second to GDP?
Oh, very much so. I think purchasing power is one of them. Consumption is one of them. China, you see, you got to
So
understand.
purchasing power and consumption are
Consumption
the other ones.
is very much so, because China is going through a phase. It is a manufacturing base now,
Right.
but it has its limits.
Yes.
As economic history will tell you, and every country will go through the same phase. Once you get to a limit, a certain capacity in manufacturing, the next thing is consumption. This is the transition where they're actually having some problems with. And this is where Trump and his team understand that you need to then capitalize on this so-called structural transition, because it becomes a weakness for them. So what China is doing right now is they're trying to encourage the local consumption of their goods that has caused this overcapacity by way of this tariff. Because you say there's an overcapacity, which is true.
Do you think that the overcapacity is due to the tariff or already was there? Because, I mean, don't forget, the tariffs only came into effect, actually, as far as Trump tariffs are concerned, the ones that goes up to 145%, it's basically the first quarter of this year.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the tariffs is now being articulated in actual numbers.
Yeah.
But the tariffs were already there in Trump 1.0. The trade barriers.
21%
and then,
went on
then
to
later on, the Biden administration continued with it. So the overcapacity already, the signs of overcapacity were already there even before the pandemic.
Right.
And of course, the pandemic was an absolute, it really tanked the Chinese economy, because, the shipments and this is, logistics, trade routes and all that kind of thing were virtually paralyzed. So the blowback then was huge on China. But then they had decades of savings, right? So now it's, you're talking, what Trump is trying to do is, I understand what the strategy is, to try and squeeze the last bit of your savings. And from there, you really have to then almost a level playing field, trying to level the playing field with the Americans.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I think what we are seeing is essentially a clash of cultures and civilizations. You've got the Americans thinking in zero-sum terms. They want to be leader of the pack, top of the mountain, whereas we see China trying to pursue a multipolar world. And we've got two big bullies in the playground, but they're diverging in direction. For us in ASEAN, I think we've got to ask ourselves, what does this mean for us?
Yeah.
How do we interplay between these two forces? And how do we coalesce with these two divergent forces? I think that's the question we've got to ask ourselves, right? Because we, even ASEAN, as a bloc, 13 countries, we're nowhere near as powerful as we want to be. Not yet, anyway. Not for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before on the podcast, Sam. So I think that's the question, right? How do we think about these two divergent forces? Because it's happening. It's unfolding in real time.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going through a very interesting time. I mean, no one can deny it. I think it depends on which school of thought you're from. On one hand, of course, you have the traditionalists that believe in a hegemonic power that can, once you have one single power, is like you said, earlier, I think we had this conversation where the Roman Empire always had the ethos that if you have a single power, then there will be peace. And there cannot be peace without a single hegemonic power. And I think that tradition went on to the Europeans and the British and then now the Americans. So I feel that ethos largely hasn't changed, despite your liberalism and, your school, the leftists and all that. I probably come from or at least in the last maybe 2 to 3 years, looking at what's happening, I can see the cracks in the system, and there is an opposing or a rising school of thought of a multipolar world. Although this word multipolar is not new, actually it surfaced the first time. I think this idea of multipolarity came from one of the meetings in Davos about 20 years ago. So it's not new, but I think it's becoming more apparent. And what China is adopting is what they call a global civilization. Their ethos is a little bit different in that global civilization, the philosophy behind it is we embrace every civilization, whether it's Islamic civilization, Buddhist civilization, Western civilization, Chinese civilization, Egyptian civilization, Persian civilization. It doesn't really matter. There has to be an equal respect for each of these civilizations to be included in the global order. And that is how they see it. And Western civilization is not a bad thing. It is just part of this global civilization. And that is how, I think, at the very, very, very top level, how they see geopolitics is that. Then you come to the, of course, trade and so on and so forth. Those are strategies, plans, and all that. And it is no looking at, coming back to Trump and the US, the way the leadership, or at least, the leadership of CCP even, they also know they're not going to be around forever. And they give themselves probably only another 100 years. Okay, of course, Chinese think in not in decades, they think in centuries. Seriously, they do. Even when you talk to them, it's just, look, what we have. No, I when I was in China, and I said, what we have today, it's not Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is just a face. He's transient. What we have today is actually from Mao Zedong. I said, what do you mean? He says, what we have today, it's already been planned as part of our plan for that 100 years that he's laid out for China. And he said, I don't read Chinese, but so I have to take that on face value, right? China will be a first world country by the 15th China plan, according to Mao Zedong. And they're already on the 14th. So what you see today, okay, you're talking about AI, computer technology, that is, of course, not in the plan, but what their trajectory and their planning is in that kind of quantum, which again, like you said, is a complete different mismatch. One, you have that one that believes in hegemonic power that can keep the peace, and China then believes in global civilization that is the one that ensures long-lasting peace. So you have two different ethos. That is actually right.
I have a different point of view in that sense. I don't think the ethos of what you call multilateralism, or what do you put?
Multipolarity.
Multipolarity of not having a single power, not just is an aspiration. I don't think it is an aspiration by anyone. So I'm a bit cynical from that standpoint. And I don't think even in the Chinese case or its own domestic history, it actually plays out. Because from what I see, from their own domestic history of China, it's very much a hegemony of dynasties. And the hegemony of dynasties is a single power. the system within the Chinese culture that actually makes it last for a long time is Confucianism, which is very deeply embedded from ancient history. And that system, if you really understand, and this is what I understand out of Confucianism, is actually the propagation for society to actually put the emperor as the single power. And that actually translates as well for every dynastic that came upon it, right? The difference between, and I think this may come to the other part of your expertise, which is Russia, right? What I see the difference between Russia and China is that in China, they are more autonomous within the regions. They provide for regional subsidiary empowerment with KPI metric, as you said, okay, in terms of, for example, when the CCP come about, the GDP as their metric. Whereas for Russia, the central government controls everything and expect everybody to actually follow the edict of the central power. But at the end of the day, in China, what I see running through the dynastic history, going through Mao Zedong, going through even after the CCP came to be, is actually an authoritarian hegemony of the single power of the CCP at the top of the food chain. So, and then when I look at the economics of it, I see the overcapacity that comes from the economic power is basically a domination of manufacturing, production, and market share. So I'm practically being a cynical capitalist looking at things. And I see that it's only a matter of time when you hold the hegemony that you will dictate that power. And I think Russia is a very convenient partner for China because they provide the energy, the energy input into the China economy. So it's a marriage of convenience. But really, if you look at it from an ideological standpoint, they're actually not that much the same. So I don't know whether you that's my view of how I look at things.
I was when I was in China last year. I actually visited the Renmin University, and that was for me also an eye opener because how much emphasis they have. If you're talking about economic planning,
right?
How much the Marxist-Leninist school of thought is front and center for them when it comes to economic planning, even more so than Russia today.
Right.
Russia today, believe it or not, is still it is actually democracy in theory.
Yeah.
I mean, they do have elections.
They are more democratic in that sense. Yeah.
They have elections. For China, okay, let's talk about economic planning and how they approach it. You were talking about GDP. That's one matrix. That's an important matrix because that's what people, at the top line look, you have GDP this much and so on and so forth. It's a value of how much production actually is generated within the economy. But a very, very important matrix for China is inflation. One. Number two, income disparity. Always at the actually not even the back of the mind, it's actually the front of the mind. Even more important than GDP, actually, I would say in some sense. If you take the Marxist-Leninist approach.
So the lower the number, the better.
No, not the lower. What I'm trying, inflation.
Sorry, income disparity.
Disparity.
Yeah.
The very, very, very acutely, in fact, they're obsessed with it. They're obsessed with inflation. They're obsessed with income disparity, the measurement of disparity.
Sorry, let me just get you to clarify. So they're obsessed with inflation in terms of the inflation of prices, assets, or whatever they call
Yes.
it. And they're trying to keep it down.
You keep it down because whenever, you see, it goes back to that ethos of empires, dynasties, and what you call the mandate of heaven.
Yep.
Right? Mandate of heaven, although it's the mandate of heaven, it's actually the mandate of the people. Whenever you have inflation running at, 20%, 100%, 200%, like in the end of the Roman days, you're definitely going to have an empire collapsing. And every Chinese empire, every dynasty, every dynasty, at the end of the dynasty, inflation is always the one that actually devalues the assets of the people, the wealth of the people, the economy collapses and so on. And that is when you're going to see a new revolution coming in. And the CCP is obsessed with that. So that is what it means by mandate of heaven, as far as today we're talking in economic terms, right?
Yeah.
Right? But that is what mandate of heaven to them. That is what it means. So they're very, very, they look at it very closely. So that is one of the matrix that they look at. Now, coming back to overcapacity, China is having problems right now trying to shift domestic consumption to take up the slack in international consumption.
That makes sense.
So they're encouraging people to buy. But Chinese culture is so ingrained in savings. We're not used to spending. We're not used to borrowing to go for holidays. That is just so, for a Chinese mind, it is so bizarre. I mean, I think they have never even to actually borrow to go on a holiday, to borrow. I mean, you borrowed to get a car because it's you need it to to generate more income. That's fine, but you don't buy something, a luxury item, on borrowings. I mean, credit card is different. Credit card is because it's convenience, So so that's where Xi Jinping is struggling. I mean, I think the CCP right now, the economic teams, they're struggling with that. Now, coming back to Xi Jinping, actually, China is not about Xi Jinping at all. Not at all. He may be the face of China at the moment. Aggressive, probably a lot more. I mean, he gives the impression that he's very, a lot more aggressive than his predecessors. But it is transient,
Well, I don't know. I mean, let's talk about, before we go to Xi Jinping, before I have my thoughts on what has happened to China since Xi Jinping, right? Because
12 years.
Even
12 years.
Even dynasties, if you study them, each dynasty has their own characteristics.
Yeah.
And they have really consequential impact on the Chinese population and economy that last at least a few decades, right? It can be transient, as you say, but transience can be measured in 30 years, 40 years, or 100 years, right? And
no, you're talking about transient for Xi Jinping or transient for CCP?
Even within the population or the history of the civilization, right? So even when you look at CCP, you're absolutely right. I agree with you that the transient nature of the leadership is there. The difference with Xi Jinping is he abolished the two-term limit.
Correct.
Right? He basically hold the Secretary General, the presidency, until only recently the military, the military faction, basically the power base of the military. He abolished the advisory committee on top of him. So they were no longer, so that particular, in my opinion, I was telling Chuang, that particular mechanism was very crucial in terms of maintaining stability and actually not just stability, but also a smooth transition of power, relatively speaking, right? So the rule of Xi Jinping has gone back to almost the cult-like personality status of Mao Zedong. And we know what happened with Mao Zedong. The Great Leap Forward probably killed at least 16 million people by Chinese own estimates. The Cultural Revolution probably go between 140,000 people by their official estimate to approximately, maybe by other people's looking at it, to almost 1.5 million people. So in that sense, it's not so much the transiency in the historical context that we are looking at. It's basically looking at the current situation and maybe within the next 2 to 3 decades, right? What's going to happen, whether it is with Jinping or post Jinping, right? The overcapacity actually has been coming for a long time. And I'm not sure, and I think this is what Trump knows and his team knows very well, and you rightly put, they are putting the squeeze knowing the current economic situation in China, which is, I think they have a problem with possibly inflation. The closing, I don't know how big is the impact of the tariff on the production capacity, but definitely we all know that consumption is a problem, right? And I also actually, I've said it in 1 or 2 of our podcasts, my biggest problem with economic data coming out of China is the population number. I don't believe the population number.
Okay. I think, first of all, I really must...
No, go ahead. Please push me back.
I really must correct a lot of this preconception about the Western narrative about China.
Right.
You and I read you and I read mainly in English.
Yeah.
I don't read Chinese myself.
We are all bananas.
We're all bananas here. The problem is that we are, you get 2 extremes, I find. It's either a Western narrative that is so skewed pro-China that it's basically, it's like, wow, okay, rose-tinted glasses. Or what you have just told me, which is a Western narrative of what China is. And it's not what China says about themselves. 2 different things.
Yeah.
Right? What the Western narrative is on China is not what China says about themselves or how they see themselves and how they look at the world as well. This whole demographic collapse thing, right? I'm always very, very amazed by that. You go to China today, no one, I don't think one single person will tell you, China, we don't have enough people. I tell you, not one single person will say, oh, in China we don't have enough. Russia, yes. Russia, it has a landmass that is so huge, and they're only I think something like 200. They just don't have enough people. But in China, nobody will tell you, oh, I don't have enough people.
Yes. May I just say this a bit on that, right? May I say this a bit of that? I came on that not from so-called Western media, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
All right. I was looking at it because I look at it. What initiated my thought on that was actually the mismatch between consumption and production.
Yeah, I mean the
Okay.
mismatch. I think nobody would dispute that. Not even the Chinese policymakers and the economic team. They totally. That's why they have had numerous stimulus packages over the last 3-4 years since the pandemic.
May
But
I ask
yet-
this question
and
then?
yet
Before you go further, why do they put in that stimulus package? What is their objective? Sorry, I divert a bit, but
it is to switch, as you said, is to actually switch manufacturing consumption. Is to actually increase the domestic consumption.
By what? By increasing
to boost the GDP, because GDP is not only about production; it's also local consumption. It's also part of the GDP, your GDP calculation.
So the stimulus is provided to who?
It provided to local Chinese so that they can buy more stuff to be able to take up the overcapacity, and that is not working. That is not working.
Won't work. I don't see it working.
It is not working. It is not working.
You provide stimulus. Normally, when you provide stimulus, what you're doing is actually increasing production. You're not increasing consumption. The only stimulus that works is actually if you put more money into the pocket of your people, that they have additional money to spend.
This is what they're trying to do. But the stimulus is people are still saving. Even if you give me $1,000, I will still save 90% of what I have. That is the problem. It is not the stimulus is not working in China is because people are just not spending.
Contrast the Americans during the pandemic, right?
Or the Australians for
I can't remember
every
how
day
many-
go and buy lobster, makan this, makan
In America, they went on Robinhood and they traded penny stocks like GameStop and they bought, what is it, Bitcoin or whatever, right? So the thing is, right, here's my thing, right? What we believe to be right or true about America is by and large, accurate to some degree, right? What the rest of the world thinks about China is by and large to some degree inaccurate about China.
I
So
think
China
so.
has a
I
very,
think
very bad skill set where it comes to
for the West for
they've got no CMOs, right? There is no
What do you mean by CMO?
chief marketing officer, right? America has got chief marketing officers coming out of their yin yang, right?
yeah.
China
That's
does a
not they-
very
yeah,
poor
that's
job
not- they
talking
do.
about itself.
They do.
Do they know this omission? Do they realize
They do.
that?
They do. They do
What are they doing
recognize
about
it.
it?
Well,
Because
I mean, the fact that they have an alternative to say Al Jazeera. I remember.
But
the days
CGTN
when
is rubbish, right? I mean, to the rest of... So the thing is, right? No, it is. Come on, right? It's rubbish. So the thing is, to be less fearful of something, one must understand more about that something. We don't understand China. I'm Chinese. I don't understand China.
Well, I
know.
may
I
I I don't want to come across as anti-China.
No, we are far be it from the truth. Far be it from the saying, right?
I think the
We just understand
I think the
America.
misconception is real. That's what I'm trying to say.
Correct.
Is that I think it is a skewed view of China, which I think is not accurate. It could be something in between. I don't know.
I'm trying
right?
to understand China the way I understand America, right? Because I live there. And I have business that I deal with there. I've went to China on business. I visited them. I'm trying to study. I look at it because it's, whether it becomes a sole superpower or not is irrelevant because it is already a superpower as far as I'm concerned.
You're talking about China or US?
I'm talking about China, right? So it's already an economic superpower. That anything that happens within China, if their economy collapses for one reason or another, it's going to impact us.
Yes.
It's going to impact the whole global economy, right? So it's very important for us to truly understand what is going on in China and how to anticipate what happens in China in by itself and also in relation to other economies, including and especially the bigger economies in America, in the EU, especially, right? So when I looked at it and what I studied when I went to China and I think I mentioned it before, it was very clear to me that their production cost is so low because they are overproducing that per unit cost it makes no sense, and there are no more buyers for the excess production, right? They are basically dumping. Hence, it does not surprise me that the EU has put on an anti-dumping tariff on their goods, right? So then I go back and I say, how are they going to solve this problem? Because one of their metric is GDP. And that's a huge metric in spite of what you say. Let's say their metric, another metric is actually income disparity.
Yeah. Yes.
But that is a different mechanism you have to handle altogether.
Oh yeah. Of course.
But GDP is a metric easily done by regional officials in order for them to get promoted, in order for them to get recognized, right? Within the CCP, within the 96 million CCP strong, bureaucracy. If you think about it as a state by itself, the CCP is its own state, So if you look at that, I ask myself that question, can they consume? Going back to that question, right? Can they consume? My problem when I look at that consumption is this. From 1979 to about 2015, you're talking about 35 years of one-child policy. There is no way, when I look at the numbers from pure statistical and mathematical standpoint, that they would have a 1.4 billion population. Mathematically, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you see, when you look at 1.4 million people,
1.4
billion people consumption, are you also taking into account their wealth?
No, I'm just looking at. I'm not looking at the wealth.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at the wealth.
You have to.
First, we know.
Because if your income per person PPP,
right,
if it's going to be double, then virtually you can actually cut your population by half, right? To be able to maintain the same level of consumption.
I agree with you.
Right.
I agree with you. But here's the issue. I tried to separate, right? I tried to separate the consumption first, because you are absolutely right. You can have per capita GDP higher. Which is what America is. America is 360 million people, but they have a per capita GDP of 82,000, right? 82 or 84,000. But then, I mean, the GDP for per capita of China is around, I think, probably what right now, 14,000? 12 to 14,000?
Yeah,
correct.
Something like that.
Okay,
yeah.
But irrespective of that, right? When I tried to study how are they going to boost consumption, right? So you got to boost that consumption fourfold or fivefold from that 12,000, right?
For sure, which is why they're actually pursuing what you call rural development, because there are still a lot of people in the rural areas that have very, very low income still. So that has not been tapped, and this is also a structural issue within the Chinese economy. It's not so. To me, if you look at overcapacity, is in the manufacturing area. But what about the service sector? What about the agriculture sector? That hasn't actually been tapped properly. The mining sector, construction, of course, is oversaturated, right?
Yeah.
But when people say that there is a housing crisis in China, they think that people are going to be sleeping in the streets. No. 95% of the people in China have a home.
The problem is the overcapacity
in the sense
of
that
the building.
People it's actually speculators.
Yeah,
right. So a family could actually own maybe 2-3 flats and condominiums and so on and so forth. Which, as far as CCP is concerned, that is your problem, because houses are for living, not for speculation.
So let me ask you a question then. How long do you think this overcapacity and actually rebalancing between consumption and capacity, how long do you think it will take?
Don't know, because the way China plans, and if they want to do something, it can be quite swift. So what they're doing already, youth unemployment is a problem all over the world, including China. China is a big problem. So what they have done is that they have actually gotten graduates who have that knowledge because they can read, they can, study, look at data and things like this. They're sending them back to the rural areas because a lot of them, like you say, one-child policy, a lot of them actually have land from their grandparents, from parents and all that. One is to look after their parents. Secondly, is to bring technology and AI back to the rural areas and boost food production and food security. Another matrix for China is food security. For them, that is the number one thing that actually is in their minds.
Do you believe
Because
that they don't have food security right now? I sort of think that they already have food security.
I tell you, their food security is like, I want to make sure that I have enough food for the next 20 years, even if I go to war for 20 years. That situation, that situation you're talking about, the Mao situation, was a very, very bitter experience for them. They will never allow that to happen ever again.
So if they already have food security today, right?
They don't think that they do, okay?
Yeah, but that's always the problem that I see. I mean, culturally, also, that's the weakness that I see because they are always thinking that they don't have enough and they will overproduce again. That's the thing that
is the problem. That is the problem. But like I said, the overcapacity is in manufacturing, but not the other areas.
So we are seeing a China influx now. I think. I mean, that's the sense we have in the rest of the world, right? There are those go-go days, 9% GDP, those days are gone, right?
Yeah.
We're now in China stage or version 1 or whatever, right? Where are they now in terms of their transition plan? So you talk about century-long economic plans, right? Where are we now in that plan? What's the next stage for China?
Okay. The next stage for China is definitely technology and space.
Okay. Space. Okay.
They're very much into that.
Okay.
That's why they have spent so much money on the Baidu system, the satellites. They have to make sure that they have enough. They're autonomous. They have autonomy in terms of their information. What I think I actually read in an article, what China and US actually, to me, is not the manufacturing anymore. I think that tariff war, global trade, tariff war, it's over.
It's over. It's overblown.
It's over it's over. I mean, yes, of course, you're going to still have to negotiate and so on. So, for me, it is not. It is not Trump's play.
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
It's not Trump's play.
Of what?
No, this global trade, tariffs. To me, it's a smoke screen. It's a smoke screen, right? It's a smoke screen of something that's a lot.
Well, it's going to be finite. It's going to be.
It will be finite and it's transient. Okay,
it's done.
It's done for me. It's done. Whether it's 5%, 10%, 500%, 100%.
That's it.
All this. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the next big play is the financial markets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The status of the dollar as the reserve currency. As a trading settlement
de facto global
tool,
reserve currency,
right?
yeah.
And AI and military might.
Okay, so let's talk.
That's what it is, So this whole thing on trade, for me, the consumption, the overcapacity is in manufacturing.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
It's actually, I believe they will get over it simply because you just need to switch to more the high end stuff. So that's why they're all into all these AI chips and all. So it's
the
a chip war.
high-end stuff. One of the biggest
It's all
problems.
the chip. It is about the chip war. Go ahead.
I think that's one thing that we've been talking about, right? Which is the high-end stuff, which is the AI, the chip manufacturing, all the technology with respect to say data centers, etc.
Well, let's put
that uses less people as well.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. The robots and automation,
You
right?
know,
So
and
let's
that's a global problem.
let's put this in a wrapper. Okay, the wrapper is this: you've got China that used to be the world's biggest holder of T-bills. I think they've halved that in recent years to something like 700 bits, right?
Maybe about 30%. They have about 700
100
billion
of
now. Yeah,
outstanding,
from
right, T-bills.
1.2, 1.3 now
Okay.
back down to, about 7. Okay, about
Correct.
half. Yeah.
So they've been paring their dollar reserves. You've also got this move into automation and AI. They understand that depopulation is a global thing, including in China, despite what you might suggest about how the people think there's not enough people in China, right? Birth rates are down, right?
Yeah, birth rates are down. And I think what they're looking at is actually...
Is the supplanting of human capital with automation and robots, right?
Okay, again, we are actually using a capitalist model and applying it to a China, what I call a hybrid model. Less people,
Less consumption.
less consumption, less wealth. As I said, they want less people, but high income. That is what they're trying to do.
You talked
They're
about that
actually trying to move
in
to
the
a
last
higher.
discussion we
They
had.
want less people,
Yeah.
but higher income. That is
And better qualities of life.
And better quality of life.
So you also mentioned a pivot towards the military, right? How is that manifesting? And again, we talk about Taiwan and we talk about the Ukraine and all that, right? Where's the Chinese thinking where Taiwan and the military is concerned? The interplay with the dollar, the interplay with the T-bills, the interplay with AI and automation,
I think
the
as
interplay
far
with
as
space. Where does it all fit together? No, imagine you're talking to an 8-year-old, right?
yeah.
And the 8-year-old is trying to understand, what do we do? Right?
No. What aspect of it? You're talking about AI. You're talking about Taiwan.
They're all
you're talking about
it's more
military?
free. The truth is, it's all connected.
Yes, it is, but
It's all
it isn't.
connected.
You know, because AI can be from the economic standpoint, and
Correct.
from military standpoint, whatever. You know, so you got to okay.
Let me start in this way to help out, right?
Okay.
Because I find one item very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your opinion with respect to Taiwan? Where do you think their gambit is?
No, I think for China, it is a war that is unfinished. You don't forget, Taiwan was an outpost of China for, 1,000 years or whatever. Okay. It was, yes, it's true. It's just kind of like outside, not really inside. But, once in a while you have some Chinese warlords that will go in there and then, live there and then rule from there. But okay, never mind about history. Okay. So we're not talking about Palestine, Israel kind of argument. As far as China is concerned, Taiwan belongs to China because when there was a civil war against Japan, so they won the civil war against Japan. No, sorry, they won the war against Japan. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Then there was at the end of World War II, and Taiwan was given to China because Taiwan was under the Japanese.
Oh, okay.
So when they lost, it was given to China.
It
Whether
was
you say
given to
given to
China.
China. Okay, and this
What
is
year was that?
1948.
Is that the
It should be
Manchu-
about
is that
it should be
the-
about 1948. This is under
Around World War
Roosevelt.
II?
I think, end of World War II. Roosevelt. Okay, gave Taiwan to China.
All right.
Okay, but the center of power in Beijing at that time was Kuomintang.
Right.
After that, they went into a civil war
Right.
with the Communist Party.
Right.
Communist Party then won the civil war. Kuomintang then ran off. Chiang Kai-shek then ran off to Taiwan. Until today, there has not been a ceasefire. There has not been a treaty. There has not been any so-called demilitarized zone. They just simply decided to just stop fighting. So there is no agreement whatsoever. Technically speaking, they're still at war. There is no piece of paper to say that, we're going to stop, we're going to, cease fire.
So how do you think how do you think
So as far as
China is going to take Taiwan back?
Let's look at the thinking first, okay?
Right.
As far as every single Chinese that I know, right, Taiwan belongs to China except for Taiwanese themselves.
Except for
Taiwanese themselves, of course.
That's interesting.
So Taiwan.
So I spent a month in
Taiwan's
Taiwan.
up, yeah.
and
Taiwan,
that's exactly what they
that's
said.
it.
Yeah.
No way. We're going to fight to our death and all
Yes,
that
yes,
kind of thing.
that
So
right.
you're
That
talking
sounds
about
like Ukraine
Okay.
and Russia.
It is. It is. So
Because
and they're
Putin wants-
they're
Putin
the
wants
same
Ukraine.
people, and then they're the same people. So if it wasn't for Xi Jinping, okay, now we're talking about personalities,
Okay.
right? The problem is that Xi Jinping went ahead and drew a red line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Taiwan. If U.S. declares independence for Taiwan, we will invade. So he drew a military red line. That was his problem, I feel.
Why do you think
But-
that's his problem?
Because
that-
as far as
that
I
was
think
never done before him,
that's
was
never
it?
done before.
Okay.
And as far as Chinese people are concerned, it's like Hong Kong. Taiwan is ours. Now, how are you going to claim it back? I think initially, and some people still hold on to this so-called strategy, is as long as China is prosperous, Taiwan actually economy, especially now that if it's TSMC is going to move their fabrication plant to Phoenix, which I think they will, Taiwan's going to hollow out.
It's going to hollow out.
They're going to
Okay.
hollow out.
Okay.
And already there are so many Taiwanese migrating and marrying, intermarriage between Taiwanese and Chinese. It's going to depopulate itself and become one of China within a generation. There's not even going to be enough men in Taiwan to even join the army, the Taiwanese army.
That's pretty good for the that's pretty good for the men though, because the equation for women is better. That sounds like a great place to live.
Anyway, I mean the whole Taiwanese culture, and I understand they do want to actually develop, and they are actually trying to have their own Taiwanese literature, culture, and things like this. So to in a way distinguish themselves from mainland Chinese. But I think at the end of the day, if you want to talk about low population numbers, I think Taiwan is having a worse situation.
I mean, certainly when I was there, I spent a whole month there, traveled the whole country, ran
Yeah.
anti-clockwise.
Yeah.
And yes, it does seem as if it is very much an aging society.
Very much so.
Very much so. And the young graduates, that I talk to them, right, find it very hard to get a job.
Yep.
And salaries are not great.
Yep.
So
That
what
tells
you're
me
saying
a
is
bit
the
of a
reclamation of Taiwan will happen organically
For me, it
without
will
any
happen
intervention.
if there's no intervention. If there's going to be intervention, it has a nefarious,
Yeah.
Triggered
intent,
by,
right?
or triggered
Because
by.
I don't think the Americans, I'm sure 90% Americans don't even know where Taiwan is, okay?
Well,
Right?
I absolutely
yeah,
think that, yeah.
maybe even higher.
But
maybe even higher.
okay,
So it is not about Taiwan. It's about China. So China knows that, you see.
So the thing is, if G had just left it alone and not make a big deal out of it, it would have organically come as time goes by. It may just happen.
return to the
So why does
mothership.
he do that?
I think at that time, again, Xi Jinping has a different approach. Not everyone agrees, but his stand is a lot more aggressive than his predecessors. I mean, he has, as you said, but mind you, although you say that he's behaving like an emperor right now because of this U.S. so-called attack on China, what you have is a siege mentality in China. You do a poll. His leadership is probably one of the highest ever of any leader in China right now.
Where is the Chinese military where strength is concerned? Is it better? Is it as strong as we think it is, or is it not?
I think I think 2 years ago, I remember, I think there was some scandals happening there. But that I think has been cleaned up. A lot of things may not be what it is, which is true, because there are a lot of things we don't know. So there has been leaks and so on and so forth. So has anyone done an honest assessment on where China is in terms of their
Its military strength?
military strength?
Well, most of
Nobody
the
knows.
most of the
Nobody
G7
knows.
or most of the G20, they
Nobody-
report annual spending on defense as a percentage of GDP, right? And we know where we stand. I mean, America is the biggest spenders, and reportedly, China is a fraction of what America spends on its defense, right? But it's that nobody knows the truth, right?
Nobody knows the truth. Nobody knows the truth. But I can tell you they are going around the world buying enough resources. A lot of the gunpowder that actually goes into Russia in the Ukraine war, it comes from China.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
I feel, okay, this is just talking to different people. In so far as technology is concerned, I think the West is still ahead in military technology, or even technology as in general. But what China has is scalability.
Yeah. They have they have more shipyards than anybody else in the world.
They have scalability. They can produce bullets. They can produce ammunition. Yeah. So what if you have an F-35? So what if you have the best equipment, but you need artillery? You know, it's like having a me having a Kanchiu, you having a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
I have petrol. You don't have petrol. I'm still ahead of you.
Yeah. I think what a lot of people don't realize is the easy conversion of industrial ability or industrial capacity to military capacity, right? Highways can be turned into airstrips, right? Factories can be turned from producing furniture to producing whatever, right? Turning from producing cars to producing tanks. We talk about how AI and robots can be used for domestic purposes, serving food, whatever, right? Driving trucks. But you can also militarize robots, can't you? If they can dance around and jump from A to B,
I mean,
they can also handle
that
weapons.
is the whole, you
So
on
that's-
social media, you see all
you know,
these,
the Boston Dynamics and all these things, right?
Fireworks,
Yeah.
display of, 10,000 drones and all that. That's
Correct.
not for, yes, it is also for entertainment, but it's actually a message. It says, look, this is my capacity.
Yes.
So
And-
if China is going to be a power of that magnitude, right? How do we in Southeast Asia manage that, considering issues like the 9-dash line that has been unilaterally put to us by China, and even the Spratly Islands, where they basically just put up their installation and, anybody else around that, they just chase you out.
Okay.
So that's not very friendly, don't you think?
Okay. Again, I think you need nuances. You need to look at China's foreign policy in a very nuanced manner. Let's go back to what you were saying. Whether China believes in hegemony, whether their approach is hegemonic or not. I think as far as the Western is concerned, we're all agreeable that it is hegemonic power from the Romans' time, Pax Americana, that kind of thing, that holds peace as far as they're concerned. I think there's no dispute.
I don't dispute that.
We don't dispute that.
Yeah.
As far as China is concerned, I still go back to I still believe that it is a global civilization that they hang on to and they believe in it. China has never been a conquering empire. They're very clear about who they are. Their identity is very, very strong. They know who they are. As far as the current Chinese government is concerned, as with CCP, not 1 inch, right, will be given away. That line, that border is the Qing dynasty border, and they go by that. And they will never, ever, ever, ever give that up as far as this regime is concerned. You look at China, okay, that is established. You look at China when they go into, say, Africa. The way they treat the African countries, they help them build bridges, they help them build ports. They go to South America, same thing. The kind of friendship that they have extended to all these people, you look at that, it looks very benevolent. They're building friends outside. But when it comes to Southeast Asia, this is where I agree with you. That is, as far as China is concerned, it's my backyard. So the way they treat us is different. The stand is a lot more, I feel, a lot more aggressive and a lot more
Hegemonious.
hegemonic.
Senate corresponds
So
with
our perception in ASEAN, in Asia, especially on this side, looking at China appears to be hegemonic.
But it does, doesn't it? If you put your
appears
borderline right across next to Sarawak, how am I going to think differently?
Well, you remember
Yeah.
how 2 hours ago, Sam, we were talking about how when Chinese factories come to Malaysia, they import their people, their
Yeah.
machinery, their industrial automation. Same thing in Country Garden, right? Down Johor.
Yeah.
Every single resource they had was
Correct.
imported from China. There was no interplay with the local population.
I think it's something that China will have to learn, that this is something that people don't like it.
I think they did
And
the
we
same
have
thing.
to,
Do they care? No, wait, hang on.
and
Africa.
they
But
do
do they
the same
care?
thing.
Do they
So they
care?
have to learn that.
Do they care?
Do they care? Yeah. There's such a big
I think they will,
superpower.
which is why you see people like India, you see people like Pakistan. That's why we need to know how to play both sides.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
I think it's a matter of. I think it comes down to skills.
I think if you ask me, if you ask me, I'm probably a very cynical person, right? As I said, I believe in America believing that they will always be number one, and they will hold on to that ethos, and they will ensure that they are number one. All right, I accept that fact because they are not going about pretending otherwise. Okay. On the other hand, with China, what I find is actually a lot of people are taken up with this shall we say marketing of China being a benign power, right? And I'm to put it mildly, I'm cynical. To put it more harshly, I think it's delusional, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupt absolutely, and nobody is immune to that. To me, their stance on Taiwan is exactly Putin's stand on Ukraine. There's no different there. To me, their stand on Southeast Asia and putting the 9-dash line, because they can do it, so they do it. And then the so-called money diplomacy of soft power that goes to even in Southeast Asia or in Africa actually tells a whole, to me, also tells the same story, because basically it is no different than how I view IMF giving you loans and then owning you, right? So I honestly look at it as neo-colonialism of what happened with the IMF. And actually, I'm not a big fan of Davos. And I think Davos is basically the European trying to cling on to their losing colonial power on the rest of the world. So I am looking at it from the point of view of understanding the superpower overplay, the superpower play, and not trusting their intentions, because I don't believe that human beings are good people. I don't believe human beings are good people. I think human beings are inherently selfish. And if you give them power, more than likely, they will overrun you.
Yeah, I think we come to the crux of what we started the podcast with is, where are we going with this?
Yeah, where are we going with this? Yes.
Where are we going with this? Because I think I always like to quote Glenn Deason when he says we are actually in a period of what you call interregnum.
Oh, I like
think
that word.
without a doubt, we the entire global system is going through a massive overhaul, including the West themselves.
Yeah.
What we used to hang on to, so-called Western values, systems, it is actually, in many ways, very broken. Broken in a sense of, like you said, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mhm.
Look at the way the EU has been behaving. Look at the, all these human rights violations and so-called, especially in the Middle East. I think that one is an absolute, it is really an absolute mess there. And I don't know how that is going to play out. But anyway, that's a different subject.
Yeah.
But it does reflect on the hypocrisy of the West.
Well, I just add one more thing. I think the Middle East themselves, to a certain extent, is a contributor to their own mess.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
You see, so no one has the answer.
Yeah.
Russia also has its own hypocrisy, and so is China. But as far as the global South is concerned, and as far as I get the feeling, and at least when talking to at people at international, they are fed up. While the Western so-called value system held for a while, for about good, I don't know, if you want to say maybe 400 years or 300, it is coming to a point where people are fed up. Systems are being used, whether it's Davos, whether it's IMF. Now, what is the alternative? Is China the best solution? I'm not sure. Let's put it this way. I don't think the global South is in a hurry to abandon the Western system. But at the same time, the urgency to de-risk and to leverage on other powers is on the rise. And that is how I would explain what we're going through in this period of interregnum, where, in past, when you see that the old king is dying, but not dead yet, still. So the crown is still with him. But the next king hasn't been born yet. So we are in this impasse. And I dare say that this is not going to be something that is going to be resolved by Xi Jinping or Trump. Russia has a different problem. Russia's problem is continuity. For me, it's continuity. Without Putin, my assessment is that I don't know where the country is going to head towards.
They have a real vacuum, mate.
They have a leadership vacuum. For me, that is an issue, because the whole Putin's persona is I think empowers. I mean, it's really it's so big, right? That in the absence of that, they will have some issues there. China, I'm not so worried about China. It is going to continue with or without Xi Jinping. Whether tomorrow there's going to be a regime change, unless you tell me there's going to be a regime change in the CCP, then different, okay? But if you're talking about regime change in Xi Jinping, it's not going to make a difference. For them, the way I see their planning, it's all there, and it's done by more than one person.
Yeah, that I agree with. Yeah. That I agree with, because the CCP system is such that the only thing that I see today is Jinping has actually consolidated power within himself, but then the system of the CCP itself allows for a transition. It allows for it's somewhat
a pretty peaceful transition. You may have some sort of, again, even if you have a different leader, it's not going to make overcapacity go away.
Exactly, absolutely,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You still
that is where
you still have to leave that. It's not a Xi Jinping problem.
I know.
What I mean?
That is where I think when I heard Scott Besson talking on TV, right, and he was saying China need to rebalance between production and consumption, and I'm thinking to myself, this is a smart guy, right? Because I do think that between me and Chuang, we talked about it. We think that Trump has got quite a good cabinet. I think they're pretty smart people. But I think either Bassett is being unrealistic, or he is just playing for the camera, because I don't think there's going to be a rebalancing.
I heard another story. Okay, we're talking about Xi Jinping again.
Right.
His approach to so-called, economic management, which is very different from Putin. If you look at Putin, when he came into power, I think he was the head of KGB, right?
Yeah.
At the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And he learned and he saw what happened to the Soviet Union breaking up. And I think what the West and we ourselves tend to dismiss is how much that the breakup of Soviet Union have on the psyche of the Russians. They virtually lost their identity. They didn't even know what does it mean to be Russian anymore. I think that pain hasn't gone away. In any case, when he came, after the Soviet Union, 20 years after the Soviet Union, the life expectancy of a Russian male, I think, fell dramatically from 70 odd to something like 50 plus. Because of alcoholism, high unemployment, everything was breaking down. He came in. Today, the Russian ruble, I think, is probably one of the best performing currencies in the entire world, okay, in the last 2 years. He has
given back
the identity and dignity back to the Russian. That for me is so clear. So when I was there talking to people, and it's like, oh, thank God we have a leader like him, And how did he do it? First thing he came in was, Russia was actually broken up to amongst, especially the oligarchs, because they were all either, with BlackRock, with whoever, because Russia was basically, that's why Kaya Kallas always says, let's go to Russia and break it up into pieces. That's what she meant. That means go back to the 90s, which is what the Russians will not accept, and especially Putin. So what he did was, he went to the oligarchs and he says, okay, what you need to do now is I can nationalize all your assets.
Yeah.
But I won't. In return, you continue to do your business, but you cannot be involved in politics. So that's why before Russia went to what you call the SMO, or war against Ukraine, all these things were already in place. And I was quite amazed when I was actually in Moscow, St. Petersburg. You go to the supermarkets, you go to restaurants, everybody is spending like, it doesn't even look like a country at war at all. The quality of food.
When were you there?
April.
Okay.
The quality of food, I tell you, is European quality, but Malaysian price. It is so amazing. Okay, why I say that is because the planning that went into it, insofar as they make sure that the finances are there, they make sure that everything, their food security was there before they went into this project. Xi Jinping, on the other hand, and I think this is a mistake on his part. And this is a major criticism within China itself of his leadership, is the way he actually managed the economy, not just in terms of overcapacity, but the way he went in there. And the first thing he did was he removed the oligarchs, the billionaire class.
Because Jack Ma went missing for a while.
That is
that's the most famous example.
A famous example.
Yeah, there are more than that.
So now, today, you want the billionaire class to come in and say, okay, can you mobilize this? Can you do this? Can you do this? It's a lot harder. That is where the gap, that's where he's finding difficulty in mobilizing the resources within the economy in order to achieve what needs to be done.
Maybe I pivot a bit because you brought the whole point of the fall, the breakup of USSR as being seminal, and then the rise of Putin bringing back the strong man, so to speak, that can put together and give an identity. If I go to China, when I look at it, I think after Mao and Deng's, Deng is pretty conservative, to be frank, but he started the reform movement, so to speak. And actually with that as well, I think the term limit came with during Deng's era, if I'm not mistaken. But what happened with the reforms is I think you got to Zhao Ziyang, and Tiananmen Square came about. And I think Tiananmen as an event actually ushered in a situation where the reformists were basically kicked out, because because the mindset, in my opinion, is to keep stability, right? And anytime you liberalize, you don't have stability. I mean, democracy in its own form is chaotic. That's just the basis of democracy. People protest, people want a change in leadership, people get more money, and they are more vocal, right?
Yeah,
So,
but no country and no economy has actually come up because of democracy. It's always been an authoritarian economy. Then you go into democracy.
well, it's debatable in my opinion. Actually, it's pretty debatable.
Because if you look at all the monarchs in Europe, they're all today what they have is because of the monarchies.
Well, it depends on how one looks at it. For example,
They didn't develop because of democracy.
well, I can go back to that. I have a different take on that. But going back to just China, I think that ushered in Xi Jinping, right? And that actually is where it comes to where you are, and you say where the mistakes are, because he has weakened all the other factions within the CCP and made it how he wants to do it without a counter voice to the rule. So I think that is the form of democracy within CCP that became missing, right? So to your point, and to your point, when you look at actually the Industrial Revolution or Renaissance, you're basically looking at Italy or the Renaissance period being a bunch of oligarchs from today's standpoint, right? Rather than a monarch, right? So the civilization arose from an autocratic democracy of oligarchs, right? So, and if you look at the rise of America, which is actually very interesting and unique by itself, because their fight is against the monarch. They had no states per se most of the time. And actually the Constitution was written by a bunch of probably I would call business people, and states were born. And basically capitalism took hold in that form at that particular time. So that's a very interesting civilization if one were to study it, and how they rise from a monarchy, a colonial outpost, into a constitutional republic, right? And move on from there. So I think there are different ways to look at things from my point of view.
My sense is that if you look at the American society, I think they all feel that there has to be a somewhat of a revolution. Okay, I mean, however you want to take it, whether it's in the banking system, whether it's in the financial system, whether it's in the trading system, whether it's in the political system. If you go to America, I think everyone says, no, we need change. Okay, whether you believe that Trump will be the guy or not, that's a different thing. But I think basically, I feel that there is the sense, the mood of the people is very much, we need a change and we need a revolution.
And they're willing to do it.
They're willing to do it. Whereas China, I find that this generation of Chinese, and when I speak to them, I get the sense that they're a lot more confident, and rightly or wrongly, they think they know where they're heading to. That is the mood. If you want to talk about mood of people, and I feel that's what it is. And same thing with Russia as well. And I also get the sense that they know what they want, and they know what they need to do to head in the right direction. And as far as they're concerned, they are not going to be. They feel that the Europeans are going to be hostile towards them for many decades to come, which is why they will pivot to Asia.
Well, I think I have a personal opinion on Europe right now. I think Europe is on the downward spiral. I don't think Europe
is being vassalized by US.
Not about vassalizing, actually, to be honest. If you ask me, right? I mean, I looked at Europe. They've actually shot themselves in the foot. They for the last 3 decades. Because what they've done is the EU was supposed to be a single market. Instead, what they have done is they have made the whole EU into a bureaucratic bloat. And it's not efficient. It strangles innovation. It taxes its people to a point where you really don't want to invest in the EU. And then with their climate and renewable strategy, they are just killing their own economy. So it's not a question of them being a vassal state. I think their sense of superiority in what their grandfathers has built and giving them so much money, they have already wasted it, and they're not going to come out of it. That's my sense of Europe. I think immigration is the immigration coming from a society that has no assimilative properties into that culture is just a catalyst that is going to bring them down further. So that's my take on Europe. My take on America, to look at the way you said about China, right? I think the election of Trump and how the Republican Party is moving is giving a sense of purpose to the young people. I think it's very interesting, the last election, in a sense that more young people are voting Republican, more minorities are voting Republican. And the Democrats are going to be assigned to probably the presidential wilderness for the next 3 cycles at the very least. So it's actually, I'm glad to hear though that irrespective of Xi Jinping, right, that China can actually right itself, because a wealthy China, a peaceful China, together with America, because Trump doesn't want war. Really, he doesn't. He's a businessman, right? It's good for global economy, and that's what we want to see.
Well, I love the fact that we all 3 of us sitting in Kuala Lumpur, ruminating about
other people's countries.
No, but
aspirations.
Speaking with such conviction about the Trump of the mind of Donald Trump, the mind of Vladimir Putin, the mind of Xi Jinping. The truth is, we don't really know, and I mean,
it could be anything in between, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but
they could be the most peaceable, or they could be the most. So I'm here to ask the question: so what?
Yeah, so,
So
what?
what, right?
I'll tell you the so what.
Okay.
May I start on the so what?
Sure.
Right? I'm still in business. Right? I have businesses that actually cross our border. In fact, I'm more keen on the businesses that are beyond the borders of Malaysia. Because I find that the policies that we are making in Malaysia are retrogrades. And to me, the global market is more exciting, and being able to anticipate where the market is going globally is where we as Malaysians, especially those who are engaged in business, should look at. Number one.
So aren't you contradicting yourself? You don't believe in multilateralism and yet you want global trade.
I want global. No.
Are we not contradicting
No.
ourselves here?
No.
Okay, explain.
Here it goes. I look at each individual market as being individual markets. I don't look at it as a multilateral markets, right? In a sense that I don't look at it from a globally standpoint. I look at China as a source of capital. I look at America as a source of consumption. I looked at Southeast Asia in Vietnam, hopefully Thailand, and knock on wood on Indonesia. To be honest, I'm not pretty sure where they're going, right? So, and I was telling Chuang, in a way, why I understand the mindset of Donald Trump. Because basically, I'm not a Wall Street guy. I'm not a stock exchange guy. I am a pure builder of brick and mortar business. Therefore, I look at market individually. And I don't dare to go into the Chinese market because they'll eat me alive.
Sam, I would even go. Sorry, can I? So I would even
So
go
I
so
look
far.
at growth, right? So
Correct.
I look at markets that are gonna are
So
growing.
you are a business builder.
Yeah.
Okay. You're an old school business builder. I
Right.
mean, we're all of the same rough vintage, right? The way I see the world in the next 20, 30 years, though, is business builders have no space in this new world. Why? Because the robots and automation and artificial intelligence has basically rendered the barriers to entry to new businesses or old extinct. Because now intelligence is infinite. Productivity is infinite. We don't need to rely on human capital anymore. We've got robots that don't need to eat, sleep, take leave, or even take emergency leave because their parents have whatever. Uncle has died. Cat did eat the homework, right?
They don't answer back.
They don't answer back. So if you are an entrepreneur trying to build a business, why? Because the AI from China or Israel or America is just going to come in and eat you up.
I think at
That's the first
I think at this point in time, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
I think using the old paradigm to explain what is going on is not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
It isn't. It isn't. Whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's a population size, it is very, very hard to actually use the old paradigm to describe what is happening or will happen. In fact, the next topic that I am going to be jumping upon, I mean, not in this podcast, but I'm exploring, is this very, very interesting way of looking at AI. You want to talk about empires? You want to talk about all empires, whether it's going to be the land empire, whether you're going to be a sea power, whether you're going to be a land power. To me, it may be irrelevant. Right now, they're talking about AI colonization.
Yeah.
Whoever has, and this is where the real race is, and I don't think, as I said, this is not about Trump, this is not about overcapacity, it's not about manufacturing per se, okay? It's about AI dominance.
Yeah.
Whoever gets their system adopted, whether it's Huawei, ZTE, GPS, Baidu system, that is the one that is going to be able to control the world.
And very closely linked to that is the means of energy production. Because if you don't have energy, you cannot build your AI.
Correct.
And the country that is building its energy systems to the hilt more than any other country is China. I mean, America moves so slow on nuclear. How many nuclear plants does China have? I mean, they have got energy production. I can't even remember the
They are not even
numbers.
looking at nuclear. No, they're looking at thorium. They're
Correct.
looking at
Correct.
other kinds of.
So the race for AI is linked to the energy race, and that energy race will create the dominant leader in, I think, the future. So for us as business people, right, I think for us trying to build a business like we did in the past, that's
it's not going to work.
forget
anymore.
it, right?
Yeah, forget it.
Don't even bother. So for me now, as the so what, as a father, as even a small business or whatever person, right? How do we position for the next 30 years? To me, it's as a macro investor. If you try and spot and connect the dots in the next 5 to 10 years, you position some level of capital, you can survive an uncertain future. I think that's how I see it, right? For me to put my kids through university and study law or medicine, forget it. I don't even know what the proposition is in the future. But if you have some kind of economic security at an individual level, I think that kind of guarantees food on the table. So that's my so what.
Even that also is not guaranteed.
Correct.
Because now you're looking at a major defragmentation of assets.
What is an
to
asset?
a very what do you mean by asset?
Correct.
Right? Is it the US dollar? Is it going to be that piece of
Is
paper?
it bloody Bitcoin,
Is it
for
going
God's
to be
sakes, right?
Bitcoin? Is
Yeah.
it going to be Ethereum? Is it going to be CBDC? Is it going
gold?
to be
Is it going to be gold? Yeah.
Right? Are we actually going to go back to the point where
Correct.
we carry, a gold belt and things like that? Are we going to go back to that kind of thing?
Correct.
Nobody knows. That's
Correct.
like I said. It is very difficult to use old paradigms to describe what's going on here, and it's actually moving so fast.
Correct.
I have this sense that trying to predict technological change and how it impacts civilization, it's a bit of it's too much science fiction to me. I mean, one of my favorite movies, Blade Runner.
Oh, that's my favorite too.
Yeah,
My absolute favorite.
and
Blade Runner.
and I think 2020 went and gone, and there's still no flying cars running around and
Soon.
no,
It's
they
called
are,
right?
VTOLs.
They
Yeah.
are.
No.
Yeah.
But for the year that it was supposed to
Yeah,
be,
we've-
right? Okay, the dystopian future with Japanese what do you call neon signs in San Francisco does not happen, right? Now, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not going to be a game changer in technology. I do believe so, but I think extrapolating what we see today to the future is also full of actually problems. You think about it, I think there are certain industry and certain requirements that's going to be very hard to so-called AI or digitalize. Now, I will say one thing actually as a just as a note, right? I was thinking about the the taking over of robots, right? I will just say one thing. What I find is with robotics as well, is there's something missing that they will never have that human has, which is emotion. Creativity comes from emotion.
Good. So what is the definition of emotion? Right.
I'll give you the exact definition.
You can actually engineer that.
No,
in
you
robots.
can't.
No, you can.
I'll
Because
tell
it's
you
feelings.
why. I'll tell you why. Because your feelings come from chemistry. Okay? How you feel does not come from your brain, actually. Your brain induces hormones and chemicals that actually makes you emote. And that does not happen with ones and zeros. All right? So I'll leave it at that.
That is a whole
Oh,
different
new
podcast by
topic.
itself.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's wrap this, right? And one by one, talk about. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things, right? We've gone all over the world. We've been in a hot air balloon, right?
That's the whole point of
correct.
this. Yeah.
So, but let's answer the so what question, right? One so what for everybody, right? What does it mean for you? What are you doing about the future in one line? Maybe Fui, then Sam, then I'll close the door.
For me, China is your neighbor. You cannot move out. That's what you have to live with. And I think for me, it is we have to accept the fact that there is going to be it's going to be a very, very different world. And the so what is how do you prepare your future generation for that kind of scenario, right? When the scenario is still work in progress. When I graduated in the late 80s, coming out to work in the 90s, for us, I felt at that time the world was so clear.
Yeah.
So certain.
Yeah.
So assured. So guaranteed. So entitled. Why? Because you have a degree. You know, that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, and then the previous generation would tell you, hey, the world is at your feet. This is your opportunity. You can do whatever you want. The world is your oyster. You have everything in your hands. Go out and fight, do this and that. And it seemed like that. And today, when I look at my kids who are now graduating, I have no answer for them. Because I simply do not know what lies ahead for them. And that is my so what, okay? So we are still discovering and it's work in progress.
Tan Sri Shamsul Saad.
Well, my so what is actually very down to earth about it. I love chaos. I believe that actually the so what of our discussion is to be able to be in the middle of a chaotic situation where you then have a better understanding than everybody else who competes with you, and it allows you that leverage because of your understanding of the chaos that is happening, that you can then be ahead of everybody else in whatever that you do, be it in your life, career, or business. So embrace chaos, understand what is happening within that chaos, and profit on it. That's my message.
Yeah, I'm very similarly optimistic. I think we're living in a golden age. This is an age where cars are driving by themselves. You're able to send money to anybody in the world without the intervention of central banks.
Correct.
Right? We are able to call food, and within half an hour, the bloody thing's on my doorstep. I don't have to leave the house anymore. I think in this era of change, there are so many opportunities. We no longer have to be the lawyer, the accountant, the doctor. You know our era, right? Forget about it, right? You can make money on anything and everything, and you can start at 10 years old. I think that's fantastic. Fantastic. I love that the way the era that we are now.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
Although it's uncertain, it's exciting.
I think we're going to have many more discussions. I think so.
I enjoyed this very much.
Thank you
very
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, thanks. Thanks very much.
That's good.
Thanks.
Thank you. All
Okay.
right. Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.